All right, everyone, I'm about to call the meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. This is the Monday, November 27th meeting of the Planning and Development Committee. We have a quorum. And the first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of November 13th. All those in favor of approving, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So next, we have item P3, which is ordinance 148-017, amending sections of Title VI to add a special educational institution public as a special use. Am I missing something? Oh, excuse me. First we have, I'm jumping ahead. First one is P1, granting vacation rental license for 1914 Jackson. And is there a second? Alderman Ravel?
Well, I guess, so tonight we have before us two different requests for vacation rental licenses, and in both cases, these are multi-family properties that are not owner-occupied. And I'm just wondering whether we as a council have considered the potential implications of this, if this becomes something that we're going to see more and more of. Should we allow vacation rentals of properties that are not owner-occupied? And if we do, should we limit the number of days per year that they're allowed to be rented out? Because I guess my concern is that to the extent that a property owner could rent out a room on Airbnb and earn substantially more than they could gain by renting it in our regular residential market, that then there's an incentive to, in fact, list these properties as vacation rentals rather than renting them to local residents. And I'm concerned about what this does to our general housing stock, and particularly our affordable housing stock.
I think those are excellent questions. Anyone else on the committee would like? Alderman Rainey? I think you raised this issue with respect to Denver.
I did, and they have legislated against Airbnbs being allowed in investor properties where the owner does not reside, and whether or not they are multifamily or not. I've done a lot of reading since our last meeting, and what I would suggest is that at our next Rules Committee meeting, that we probably, since we haven't really gotten into this, there are numerous journal articles on both sides of this issue. Of course, the landlord side of the issue is that this has nothing to do with restricting or inhibiting affordable housing. And however, when you read the articles, they make a lot of sense. And then you read the other articles that it absolutely positively does take affordable housing units off the market. And there are different, and I that's the side I fall on. And there are ways, though, that you can allow so that nobody, no landlord is saying that we're, discriminating against them. But there are ways to do it by saying, multifamily, non-owner occupied property cannot be rented for more than 45 days a year as an Airbnb. That way they could not take it off the market for a full year. So, I mean, we could think about it that way. But I'm thinking that we might want to do at some point a moratorium on multifamily investor-owned property so that we can come up with some reasonable legislation to figure out what to do about it permanently. Because we're in the infancy of this. I mean, we've got
Right.
3 or 4 licensed. We know there's a lot of them in Evanston. We just don't have them licensed yet.
Right. I think that if we started to make noises about the process of restricting it, if we decided to do that, we'd have a stampede of people who are coming in. So I think in that instance, a moratorium for a set period of time might be appropriate, Alderman Rainey. I have also Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, 25 years ago when we started working on the zoning ordinance, and was the first time we started talking about Bs and Bs were to be owner occupied. You could rent out a room, you could, mom and pop, that was the intention. It was the first that we ever dealt with even the concept of Bs and Bs. And now with Airbnb, they're very popular. When we talked about the Garnett Place property previously, my understanding is that it was that the property owner was looking at renting out for the summer when the students were gone, and he had a vacant house, and he was trying to fill up his rooms while the students were gone. I asked the specific question about how he structured his leases, whether they were by the year or whatever. But I am convinced that if we're going to go the Airbnb way, that it needs to be owner-occupied. I'm interested in reading both sides of the issue and would look forward to that. I agree about the moratorium. I agree that this is going into an area that is sort of a couple steps ahead of us, and we need to take some time to think about it, because I think it can have a destabilizing effect, especially in certain areas in the city where we have a lot of properties that are rented and would be attractive Airbnb candidates. So I'm with you. I thank you for bringing it up.
Alderman Wilson.
And I don't agree with any of that.
Did you mean?
I'm sorry, I don't disagree with any of that. I
That's-
apologize.
All right, yeah.
I'm looking at two things. Okay, so the other, I don't agree with anything. Some days that's how I feel. Okay, so the other one on Garnett, clearly it's to fill up the summer gap. From the materials, I wasn't totally sure. To me, it looked like this is going to be the plan for year-round. Is that correct? I don't know if the applicant's here or not. Is that's the plan, to do it year-round?
No.
Okay.
I'm signed up to, on your,
If you're the applicant, well, can we just have him come up
Yes.
so we can ask a few questions, please?
Isn't he?
Oh, no, you're Garnett. That's right. Okay.
Right.
Do we have the Jackson applicant here? Yeah, thank you.
hi,
Hi, and just tell us who you are.
Victor Malesha.
Hi, thank you for being here. We also have one that is up tonight for Garnett Place, and I guess they're planning on doing school year duration type leases.
Right.
What's your intention as far as how you're going to be leasing the property?
So I was a Northwestern alum. I'm just aware of a lot of the activities and not only the sports, but there's like musical and there's professors in town, and there's just a lot of need for it. So I was kind of focusing a lot on the school and just kind of supplying a lot of basically a need for housing, like short-term housing for people that are coming to visit.
So you're thinking of it more as a vacation rental, not as a filling in the gap when students are not present? Like,
Yeah,
what's the-
I'd like. Yeah, I mean, I like the option to do the Airbnb, but also the convention around town. I don't know if I'm applying for the right thing. If I wanted, could I do both, or is it only one or the other? I don't know if.
I think you could still do leases like
Okay, so I'm not restricted to doing one or the other.
Right.
Applying. Okay.
Right, so
Yeah.
you're just kind of looking for options.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that, Alderman
thank you
Rainey,
very much.
thank you. Your point's well taken. The licenses are good for 1 year, right? Okay. We may well need rules, but we don't have the rules yet, so I have a hard time justifying saying no to an applicant who complies with what we have.
Oh, I don't think that we should have denied these that are
Okay,
before
okay,
us.
okay.
I'm sorry if that was what your impression was. I think that these are indicative of the fact that we are probably going to have more, and the
Right.
fact that Northwestern is now requiring all of its sophomores to live on campus we're going to have more vacancies in some of these areas. So I think we should think about the issues that Alderman Rainey is raising and Alderman Rebel has outlined in terms of what do we do.
Okay.
Alderman Fisk, is your light about to be on? Or-
It was, and I agree with that, but I think it's important to tell the two applicants now that we are considering this, and that while it is a one-year license, there may be some changes after that 1 year.
Yeah. Alderman Rainey?
Well, and just exactly what you've said goes about the requiring the students to live on campus, goes to the vacancies coming
Right.
forward that could very well be rented to families as opposed to Airbnbs. But I'm curious to know from this gentleman here, the latest applicant, how long you've owned that property? 2.5 years. Have you been renting it out in the meantime?
Yeah, we've actually lived in multiple units at different times while we were just kind of fixing it up. So
Uh-huh. So you bought it for this purpose, really?
no, we wanted to live in it.
You bought it to live in it?
We were fixing up different levels. There wasn't a livable when we purchased it, so we lived in one unit and fixed up the other two, and then we moved to that unit and we fixed it.
Okay. All right.
We always basically just moved from.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if you recall Alderman Simmons talking about something that she's discovered in her ward, and that is people buying up homes for, and I'm not talking about you, but it just reminded me, buying up homes for unbelievably wholesale prices and renovating them for purposes she wasn't aware of at the time. And I'm just wondering if we're heading into that reason for Airbnbs and things like that.
Yes, I do remember her having
Yeah.
that discussion.
So anyway, all right, so.
All right. So, Alderman Fisk, did you have your light on again?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one other caution, and this is why part of the reason why we need to have a discussion about this going forward is that as the students, the sophomores, move onto campus next year, that neighborhood is going to change a lot. The neighborhood right west, and I'm concerned that we put protections in place that prevent those houses from being rented out on Airbnb as party venues. And we need to get the neighborhood there. It covers part of the first ward, mostly the fifth ward, but the neighbors are extremely concerned about that. They have other concerns as well, but we need to talk about it.
All right. Okay. So,
Well, just because we approve these for a year doesn't mean that we have to approve the next one. I mean, we can make
Right.
adjustments before, yeah, but these have to be approved according to
Right.
what we have now.
all right. So we have P1 has been moved and seconded. And is there any further discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Well, so.
I'm sorry.
Madam Chairman, so are we talking then about a moratorium after these two, or do we don't need to formalize it in that
Well, we don't
way?
need to formalize it now, but I do think that Alderman Rainey's suggestion that this come to the Rules Committee,
I've referred it to the Rules Committee.
yes, and then at the Rules Committee, we would need to talk with the legal department about a moratorium and the effects of that. And the best way, if we wanted to do that, what would be the best way to structure that? Usually, the best way to do that has been to have it time limited. Right. Okay. So, Matt, are we ready to vote? All right. All those in favor of P1, please say aye. Aye. All right. Any opposed? All right. P1 passes. It'll go on to the council. Next is P2, granting vacation rental license for 1026 Garnett Place. City staff recommends approval of a vacation rental license for this property. We have two speakers on this issue. First one is it Lanny Walls? No. Oh, I'm sorry, Robert Taylor, yeah. Did you want to speak?
Yes,
Yes.
please, we're together.
Okay, yep.
I think most of you met me before, briefly. I'm the owner of 1026 Garnett, as well as a former resident owner. I've owned the property 17 years. I'm just coming down the home stretch and paying off a 15-year mortgage next spring. And the two main points that I'd like to convey are, one, we submitted our application in September. We were scheduled for the October hearing, and then we were held over to the November hearing for reasons which were never explained to us at all. After we'd already issued the notices to over 60 neighbors within 250 feet, we got held over to the November meeting. They asked us, when we repeated the procedure, notified everybody. We phoned the Fifth Ward, which is the predominant area west, as everybody knows, of the university. Robin Williams asked for the holdover principally to give her time to consult with her constituents. For the record, it's my understanding, if anybody knows otherwise, I'd really like to know. She thought there was more than one person in the area that objected, and then she later, I'd understood, it was confirmed there was only one, a neighbor across the street. And she consulted with the neighbor. I made myself available to talk with the neighbor, Carol, who I've known for feels like over 20 years now. And so I got this message at 8:20 this Thursday morning from Robin, our alderman, saying, yes, I spoke with Carolyn, the name of the neighbor. I'm going to support this vacation rental. Thank you for your patience. Happy Thanksgiving. So our alderman, who's represented us and who's been, kind of mediating that area, it's my understanding from her, unless you all have heard otherwise, that she supports this. I'm surprised that she's not here this evening. Okay, understandable. So just so everybody knows, this is our third hearing. The city staff not only recommends approval, but they go on to say that vacation rental meets all of the standards and procedures for licensing approval. All right, so what I'm hearing is that if it was a single family or perhaps a small multifamily that's owner occupied, it's approved. But the concern centers on that I don't live there. So implied in that is it's not owner occupied. So let's take a look at that with reasonable minds. Briefly, I would ask. Right now in the city, there are multiple multi-unit buildings that are in fact have been operating for years now. There's big boxes like E2, off the northeast corner of what we used to call the old research park. When I sat on the Plan Commission, that project came through the pipeline. There were concerns similar. I mean, this problem in the city of, how can we create a business environment conducive to the formation, preservation of affordable housing is a tough nut. Rarely, in my years of listening and attending to meetings, do I hear leaders, elected officials, talk about some of the core problems, root causes of that, much of which stem from, the very high property taxes and the operating expenses for all property owners, to include water and sewer rates, which Economics 101, these costs tend to get passed on to the renters. I certainly wouldn't presume to lecture the City Council about anything along these lines, but I think this is a complex issue. Evanston is behind the times, frankly. We are woefully, shockingly behind the times in getting a handle in terms of policy formation. It's what we've seen, and it's happened very rapidly, like in the last 5 to 10 years, especially if you put it on a growth curve, classic hockey stick shape. There's been a fundamental restructuring of an important area in the housing residential market that kind of blurs the lines between traditional vacation or short-term housing, whether you call it a hotel, motel, bed and breakfast, and traditional long-term housing, whether it's 1 month, month-to-month leases, which is typical of the summer market for the university. So what I would respectfully request, given that we have done everything, we've amply demonstrated that we're a responsible landlord team. This is Cleo, by the way, who lives 3 minutes away, one of my dear friends who...
Yes, you introduced her.
Yep, so I think you all know Cleo. And
Mr. Taylor, I think
okay.
we're planning to approve you tonight.
Well, I hope so.
Right.
But
We're planning to approve you tonight.
I would,
What you heard was the discussion
Okay.
of how other cities are dealing with this and how we need to examine that, because if what you say is true, we're behind the times.
Okay,
we need to
I think I
examine
was
that.
misreading the tea leaves a little bit on that.
Okay.
So I would,
We are,
gladly make
you
myself
know.
available to, as you get into your discussions, feel free to use me as a resource. I mean, my company is a 34-year-old company in Lake Tahoe. I've only owned it 10 and a half years, but we've been managing vacation rentals for 34 years. And I can tell you, not to belabor what I said before, but these vacation renters, vacation rental guests are typically dramatically better than undergraduate students in terms of their responsible behavior.
Yeah.
Well, people laugh, but if you want to challenge my expertise,
No, I think that they're
we're-
chuckling that's probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well.
So I think.
Okay, and I think it's going to be good for the city. If we tax it, it's going to.
Happy to
Okay.
hear your expertise on this
All right.
when we get to that point in our discussion.
Okay, thank you
Okay.
for your consideration. I have Cleo and I have a little gift to give you all, and I know it's going to get a kick out of this. It'll take 60 seconds, and the court's indulgence. You'll get a laugh out of it. So,
What, you know what, we are,
I'm going to give these to you. These are,
I
we're clearing out a garage.
I already own one. Evanstonopoli, yes. Yeah.
These are antiques, harkening back to the days in Evanston.
Okay, thank you. All right. Yeah.
Okay, so vote.
What, just leave? Yeah, all right, okay. Some staff, you come take it over there. Thank you. All right, so have we moved and seconded this one yet?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Alderman Fisk?
I just wanted to make sure that I'm correct. This is only covering the summer months. The rest of the year, you will have leases.
Okay. You asked me a question of what my plans were for it, and if you look at the record, what I said is what we're seeking is to have the option, just as this gentleman just said, as market conditions develop, to give us the option to respond to the market conditions. We're all getting buffeted by this major change in the supply of housing, or I'm sorry, the supply of renters that the city has approved. And we're responding to that. So no, I'm not making my request contingent upon only doing it in the summer months. What is the summer? I mean, the university's graduate student programs start earlier.
I think we have an answer now.
Yeah,
We need to continue the discussion.
I think
Okay.
that's not fair or reasonable.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. It's been brought to my attention that this has not been seconded yet?
Okay.
moved or
I'm sorry.
seconded.
I move approval then. I move approval.
Okay, all right. So Alderman Fisk, this is not limited. This is applying, this. You understand that 1026 Garnett is applying for the same thing that 1914.
We have leases that run through August on 3 of the 4 apartments, and we only have one lease that ends in, 2 of the tenants end in mid-March, the other 2 end at the end of June. What our experience has been, even if they have a lease that runs through August, many of these kids just blow off their lease and they leave.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah. So that's the status.
Right.
It's only 4 units.
Okay, Alderman Rainey, let's keep moving. We have a really long night. Okay. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of granting vacation rental license to 1028 Garnet Place, please say yes.
Yes.
Or 26 Garnet Place, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? No. All right. Okay, I vote yes. Okay, now we're moving on to P3, Ordinance 148-017, amending sections of Title VI to add a special educational institution, public, as a special use within the I-2 district. Would someone like to make a motion so we can get this going?
Move introduction.
All right. Alderman Braithwaite, did you want to speak?
I do. So thank you, Alderman Nguyen, members of the committee. Peter Braithwaite, Alderman, 2nd Ward. At our last meeting, I actually made the referral to this committee, so I was glad to see it was up for introduction. But I do want to say on behalf of the residents, and I'm going to invite, we have the owner and applicant of the property, Mr. Reed Beigler, here. If you want to stand, we have Superintendent Eric Witherspoon, along with Mary, their CFO, We have 2 school board members, Gretchen Livingston and also Monique Parsons. So there are a lot of folks that are here in support of this application. And I'm also going to ask at our December meeting maybe to have you, a couple members of your staff present, just so we can share it in our ward meeting. So it is for introduction, so I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I think there's some important points that need to be made this evening just based on previous conversations. And we have the applicant and members of the school board here that will provide that information. The key things that I would like to pinpoint are the fact that the difference between this property versus the other property that I'm not going to mention right now is when you look at the occupancy rate, it's a very nice mix between industrial, but then interestingly enough, that only makes up 40%, and the other 41% is, and I'm going to name the places, Erie Family Center. We have another printing company. There's Rimland Services that provides students services to autistic adults. There's also Goldfish, which is swim school for babies and toddlers. Have Dreams that provides autistic services for youth. And then there's also a child daycare. I want to keep in mind the 2 important distinctions. Again, there is a contract in place and language that the high school will pay taxes, so this is not going to take the property off the tax roll or that parcel. We'll also see a tax savings to taxpayers just based on a reduction of the cost to bus these kids out of the district. And what I think is amazing is that, these are all Evanston students that are here in our community, and the thought of them staying here in our community to be educated in such close proximity to the high school is a reason that we should all get behind this. There is a time crunch, and the staff is present to discuss that, and at the end of their presentation there will be an ask to accept the special use application so that staff can provide them feedback. So I'm going to ask Mary and Dr. Witherspoon maybe to please come forward and share some quick facts, and then from there, if you have anyone else, along with Reed Beigler, that would like to present to the committee, please do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to be here tonight so that we can tell you about a project that we're excited about. I do have a fact sheet with about 12 points for all of you that I'd love to leave with you. The owner has also prepared some information about the other uses of the property, so we have that for you as well. What's important, I think, is that this project is really about our students who are spending up to 60 minutes each way per day on a bus, in a van, or in a taxi to go to a school that's outside of our area for services in the special education area. We had been, looking at doing something to try to allow those students to stay in the community, and we found a location that's 3 blocks from the school. It's on Hartree Avenue. One side of the street is industrial, the other side is residential. So I'd also like to point out that we have students who live on that residential side of the neighborhood. So we have kids coming to our campus from that area every day, say between Hartree, Pittner, Dempster, and Maine. So this is not a highly traveled industrial area per se. Like I said, Hartree is industrial on one side, residential on the other. This particular location would start out serving about 20 students. It would never grow past 40. Not every student would be a candidate to be served in this location, but those who would be successfully served by certified teachers. We expect that it would create between 12 to 18 jobs in that location. Certified teachers, paraprofessionals, clerical staff, and safety staff. So this would allow our students who are currently being served outside of the community to integrate back into whether it's an after-school program, a before-school program, a sport, an activity. It would also allow students to more easily take a class or two as they try to transition back into the main campus. Some will come as much as half a day and then transition back into the campus full day. We did look at a couple other sites, too big. There were various things. I just want you all to know that we just didn't this wasn't just a site that we picked to be difficult. As Alderman Braithwaite said, there would be no effect on property taxes. We're proposing we have a 10-year lease in place. This is not a map amendment, which would then leave the property rezoned should we leave it. This is a text amendment. In fact, in the lease, it's written in that we pay our share of the escalator of the property taxes within the building. So we do have, as Alderman Braithwaite mentioned, our superintendent, members from our legal counsel, our architectural firm. We have our director of special education. We have our associate principal of school operations and logistics. We have our director of capital improvement and board members, as Alderman Braithwaite mentioned. So we're happy to answer any questions and concerns, and I'm not sure what's appropriate to do next.
Okay, that's good. All right. Dr. Witherspoon, did you want to speak for a minute?
Yes. Just real quickly, and hello, everybody.
Good evening.
This is really a win-win-win kind of opportunity for us. It's certainly a win for our children with special needs. Instead of having to spend as much to an hour each direction being transported out of the community, we can offer services for them right here in our community, and we'd open with over 20 students. We'd go up to about 40. It's a win for the taxpayers because we would not only maintain the property taxes, but we would be creating between 12 and 18 more jobs in Evanston that right now we're paying for in some other community because we have to pay a tuition for our students to be bussed out of the community. So again, an economic development to be sure. It would also be a win for the families to be able to have their children right here in their own community, to be able to have their children served by their people who are invested in them as residents of Evanston. It would be a win for the families and the children, the fact that it is located only 3 blocks from the high school. You know, there aren't a whole lot of other spaces in Evanston that would accommodate something like that. I mean, we're not going to put it downtown. We're not going to put it in just in the middle of many of the neighborhoods in Evanston. But here we have a location that clearly has a mixed use, that is located very close to the high school. And those young people, as Mary said, would be able to actually take advantages of many of the services in their own community, both at the high school, after-school activities, and the like. That right now, it's very difficult, if not almost impossible, for them to do. And finally, it's going to save taxpayer money. Since Dr. Walls came here, we've been bringing young people back into the high school that we can accommodate, and we have saved over $1 million of taxpayers' money in the last 2 years because of that. Again, this investment will be in our own community, and it will, be, in the end, ultimately be less costly than it's costing us today to serve and transfer students out of Evanston. So we sure hope that you'll support this, and we're pretty excited to bring this to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Alderman Rainey.
Yes. I would,
Mr. Vidler, would you like to
I'd
speak?
like to.
I promise to be very brief. I've been sitting here and I understand.
Sitting here.
I can speak.
Could you
I'm
identify
sorry.
yourself? Yeah.
I'm Reed Vidler, and I can speak. I was going to give you a little more background on the property, just so everyone knows exactly what we are getting ourselves into. And I've got a handout here that's just one page that summarizes the current tenancy in the property and the different uses, which I actually found interesting this morning when I put it together.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I had not really stepped back and looked at, I mean, I knew all of my tenants. Many of these tenants have been with me for more than 10 years, but I was surprised to see the mix between what I would call light industrial or assembly and other alternative uses. And again, to be brief, I've been involved with the property for over 30 years. Interestingly, it's always been like this. It never has really, it's not like it's suddenly went from industrial or even has evolved. Even for the last 25 or 30 years, it's been primarily a very mixed-use, eclectic group of tenants. I found it interesting to see the proportion of actual employees in the different types of uses. Again, I had not put this together myself before I did it this morning. Again, briefly, I would, Mary and Eric have done an excellent job of describing what they want to do with the space, and I can, so I won't go over that or reiterate it, but we do have two other groups in the building that have autistic clients. We have Rimland Services and we have Dreams. And I'll spend just a minute talking about Have Dreams because it's to my judgment, it's both a very complementary and supportive use of the space by the high school. Some of you may know that Have Dreams was successful placing a number of its clients with one of the people in the building who we would call an industrial user, a commercial baker, Sugar and Spice, and they were successful in transitioning those students from Have Dreams on a full-time basis to working for Sugar and Spice, and now actually out into the world, the real world, and working as employees of public companies. A couple of them work for Amazon, as I understand it. To me, it's a very complimentary and supportive use of the space within our building, and we look forward to having them there. The second area I'd like to address is timing. However we got here, I mean, it seems the time has gone by more quickly than it should. But we have the zoning amendment process tonight, and then obviously City Council has to approve if an amendment is to be made. But then we have a special use process which involves the Zoning Board of Appeals, and it's required public notice. Then we have normal permitting and the actual build out, and something Mary and I have talked briefly about, and certainly her staff and the other people from the high school know more about. The ramping up process or the integration of the actual students and their parents into the space is not something like you can say, by the way, we're going to unlock the door on September 1st, please be there. As I understand it, there's much more of a cooperative, supportive process in doing this. So what I would ask the Planning and Development Committee to do is to ask city staff to review and process the special use application during the pendency of the application for a zoning amendment. This would enable us to let that roughly 30-day process run at the same time. It certainly does not usurp anyone's rights or the council's rights to approve and consider thoughtfully what is being asked for and what should be done. But it would enable the process to be shortened so that we can get to hopefully a zoning board of appeals meeting on January 2nd and final consideration by the city council on a special use at the January 8th meeting. This would significantly shorten going purely sequentially. And as I thought about it this afternoon, I thought this is a fairly straightforward request, and and ultimately approval rests with the council anyway. Ultimately, everyone on the council, this committee and the council, have their right to listen and decide what they want to do. The only people to whom this time really matters are the students. I mean, a year is a year, but another year of being bused, another year of not being potentially able to access the high school. I would genuinely say that it supports your consideration and as I say, directing staff to accept the application with it clearly understood that it's subject to acceptance and approval by the City Council of this amendment to the zoning ordinance.
All right. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. First, I have Alderman Rainey, then I have Alderman Fisk. Alderman Rainey?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, this is not a very straightforward process. Second of all, this council and the taxpayers of the city of Evanston spent hundreds of thousands of dollars defending an I-2 district in the city of Evanston and our zoning ordinance. I have some questions for the district. I'd like to know what makes this a special education, what are we calling this? A special education school public. What is special about this educational use?
You want us to answer them?
Yeah, I need it. I need it now. Yeah, I need it. I need somebody who is.
This is actually a terminology or nomenclature by the state of Illinois.
That's what I want to know.
And it's
What
called a
makes it
special education public day school.
Okay.
Correct.
But what makes it special?
Then can you provide
What
us?
makes it?
What's the
what
definition
is
of that?
What is the curriculum? That's, I think, what
Okay,
I
the
want
word,
to know.
I'm sorry, maybe
Are
I,
the students different? Is the curriculum different?
okay, maybe I didn't explain. And it's part of special education law. And so it's students identified with special education needs. And there's a whole legal process, both federal and state, for how young people are identified, assessed and identified, and placed in special educational opportunities.
How is that? Because what we're doing is you're asking us to change our zoning ordinance based on this definition, because this is not, the definition is not educational institution, it's special educational. So I really, and I think this council needs to understand, what does that mean? Are these students with physical disabilities? Are they physical, are emotional needs? Are they mental? What is it about the curriculum and the students that makes this special? And, you know, you're talking about your legalities, I'm talking about my legalities.
My name is Lene Walls. I'm the Director of Special Education. So the students can have a number of disabilities. Under IDEA, the special education law, there are 13 eligibility categories. The primary disability of the majority of the students will be emotional disability. However, some students may also be on the autism spectrum. Some students may have other health impairments. Some students may have learning disabilities. So any student who falls under the 13 IDEA categories could be eligible. Students with physical impairments are less likely to be appropriate for this site, but would not be excluded.
But some children who have these same characteristics would be in the regular school.
Yes,
They would be.
absolutely.
So why are these children in the special school? Why are they taken away from, what has happened that they can't be folded into the regular school?
So the goal is that they can. However, some students require a more structured and restrictive environment.
Okay.
And so
What are the trade and vocational classes? Because there's a special emphasis in our staff's description of what's going to go on in this. It was my understanding that the curriculum was pretty similar to the curriculum at ETHS for whatever grades these students are in, freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. Is that not the
that
case?
is correct. And at ETHS, we do have a robust career and technical education curriculum where students are in work sites and they are trained and they get licenses in different areas.
They in work sites off-site or on-site?
It's a combination. We have in-house employment and students who are competitively employed and supportively employed in the community.
So what are you going to have on-site here? 'Cause
Pardon?
What are you going to have on-site here?
So
Or vocational?
it depends. You know, we have not quite set that up for the specific areas, but whatever we are prepared to offer at the high school or what we have the capacity to offer at the high school, we're hopeful that we can also offer at the day school.
Okay, so here, I was at the Plan Commission meeting. I was appalled at the Plan Commission because I felt that the Plan Commission didn't seem to have been briefed sufficiently on the issues at hand. And one of the issues that I find extraordinary is that you chose this site in an I-2 district that really should not be chosen for an educational use, which you are. when almost every single district in the city of Evanston, and I'm going to read them, and I want you to hear them. R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, R6, B1, 2, 3, C1, C1A, 2, MU, MUE, MXE, T1, T2, U1, U1A, U3, and OS zoning districts. An educational, institutional, public is permitted. Special use in D1, D2, D3, and D4 zoning districts. They're special use. Almost any district you could have put this, any district. Instead, you chose one of the I districts, and you chose it without having it be conditional. I mean, you didn't make it conditional. And you must have known about the lawsuit, and you must have said, because of who we are, we can come in, because that's what Joan Dock said when they came in over at I-2 on Hartree and demanded that we change the zoning for them. And at that time, we went to court with them, and we won. And the judge said the city has the right to protect its sacred zoning powers. And for our staff and for the Plan Commission to recommend otherwise, to me, is just a shame, a real shame. And for you to stand there and say this is a simple process, it's a shame. It's a real shame. And I just can't believe that we're going to do this. And I'm shocked.
All right, I have one other alderman, Alderman Fisk. Do you have questions for?
I don't have questions for you. Thank you. I do have a question for Corporation Counsel, and I do support this. And I actually think that, given the other uses that are currently on site, I think this makes sense. I also think it makes reasonable sense for the children in our community. I think it's very important that we keep them at home if we can. My question for Corporation Counsel, though, is what did we do? I'm assuming that the special uses have been modified over time. I can't imagine that aquaponics was a special use when the zoning ordinance was written. What have we done? Have we added to special uses under the I-2 district?
I don't know if this is a question for me versus a question for the Director of Community Development. Johanna, do you know the answer to that?
Oh, thank you.
I believe aquaponics was added within the past 5 years as a special use because there was a business that was looking to locate in this area, but I don't have that up in front of me. We can research it if you'd like.
Okay. Well, I think I'm right on it. I don't think that was originally included in the special uses. So I think we have amended the I-2 district in order to include aquaponics, which is in itself educational. So I will be supporting this.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. Now, this is for introduction this evening.
Oh, okay. So have we moved that? Have we had a motion?
So it has. Okay. So it has been moved and seconded. So all those in favor of introduction, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
All right. Okay. So this will be introduced at the City Council this evening.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So my second question would be as a follow-up to Mr. Beigler's request, and that would be to submit the special use application just for staff to review and provide feedback. I don't know if we need a motion for that or if it's just possible to submit it.
Well, it's not on the agenda.
It's not on the agenda, and also I think we need to have an opinion from the law department about whether that's appropriate.
Perfect.
And if it can be done. Director Leonard would like to speak for a second.
Sure.
So in terms of timeline, the first meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals will be at January 23rd, 2018. We're going to a one meeting instead of two per month. So between our holiday schedule for December and the ZBA schedule, that we will meet that once they submit their application after the 11th. If this is approved, they can submit after that, and if they do it by the 13th, we have enough time to legally notice and make that 23rd ZBA meeting. So that would be the next ZBA meeting that they can legally request this if they are approved for to be considered for special use, is the first meeting we have anyway.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right. So our next item is for discussion, and this is our lakefront policy for private land. And we do have a brief description of what the staff is recommending here from Mr. Gertis, and I think it would be useful for us to have him describe to us what this proposal is, which I think is a very good one. Okay.
Okay. Chair, Alderman, Gary Gertis. I manage the Building and Inspection Services Division. We have 42 private residential lakefront properties in the city of Evanston. All of those properties are in the designated FEMA floodplain. For the last few years, we've had some high water levels and a heavy wave action, which has resulted in an increased amount of restoration projects on those properties. So the main concern that we have, main concern that staff has, is that some of these protections that are being proposed, or some of these protections that are being installed, are moving past what the historic eastern property line is and further into the lake. So that's the main concern that we have, is what we're seeing is that the revetments being proposed are moving eastward.
And can you define for all of us what a revetment is?
Revetment is really, it's that rock that you're seeing, the heavy rocks that are built up along the lakefront to just protect that shoreline.
Right, which some of us call riprap.
Yes.
Revetment
and a much bigger,
much nicer, yes.
So the permit application for these shoreline projects is really twofold. There's a joint application that goes to the Army Corps of Engineers, the Department of Natural Resources, and the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. The city requires a local permit pursuant to our city floodplain ordinance. So the other issue that we're having is that typically the city is not getting their application for review until after the joint piece is already completed. So we're seeing it much later in the game. So those are the two main things that we're concerned about, is that expansion into east into the lake. If you can see the detail here, the proposed seawall on your left there, typically that is your property line. And then what we're seeing is that revetment is, you can see it's going horizontally 6 feet further into the lake, and then it pretty much comes down, and that when it goes to the lake bed, you're almost at 18 feet out, or a little more than 18 feet out. Now, this is just a typical detail. It doesn't mean each and every one of them is like this. But again, that's our concern. That's our main concern, is that the recent proposals that we're seeing that expansion into the lake. Alderman Fisk. Oh, you should do
Yes.
That's fine. Alderman Fisk.
Yes, we have two chairs. Does the revetment have to be on private property?
Well, that's the discussion that we have.
Okay, when IDNR and IEPA look at this, they're not looking at what's on private or public land?
They are looking at that, but I think that we have had discussions with IDNR staff. But they'll look, and if the proposal is reasonable, if they feel it's reasonable, they have approved those, even though they do see that same movement east into Lake Michigan. So they're looking. There's not a hard and fast rule here. They do have language, as you can see up top. They do have language in their regulations that prohibit that conversion of private land by filling, but we are still seeing approved projects that do move further up. Yes. So we're still seeing those projects being presented to us, and again, we're seeing them, too late in the review process. Well, we have the legal department is looking into that. There was litigation in Indiana where it was determined that the ordinary high water mark was really that delineation point between public and private, so that was an Indiana ruling. So the legal department is looking into, just going back to that state right IDNR regulation where that conversion. So we're kind of trying to find out, where IDNR makes that delineation, where that point is. So we don't have an answer to that yet. So that's, something that we need to discuss.
So this policy, I'm sorry, did you, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
No, I've pretty much, this recaps the two concerns that staff has. We would propose maybe strengthening the floodplain ordinance to include, more definition on what that delineation between public and private is, and to prohibit that expansion into Lake Michigan, and then also require simultaneous review of these shoreline projects. And I think that is really the key here.
Right.
Like I said, we're seeing them after the joint approval has taken place. For us to go to a resident, a homeowner, they've got a lot of time and expense that's already been, put out there. That's not the time that the city should say, hey, we don't agree with this design.
Yes, excellent. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, Alderman Rainey. Can you speak into your mic some more?
No. Doesn't Northwestern have the right to continue filling in some? No.
No.
Same process. They have.
I know. According to this, but isn't there some document someplace that says?
I think Alderman Rainey, I think that if they're going to do anything more, they have to start again.
I know they should, but isn't there a document that says there's still some filling that they have the right to do?
They considered they considered filling in the pond at one point, I believe, or a portion of it, and frankly, they got such pushback from their alums that they stopped it.
Can I just make a correction?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, if I'm remembering, Alderman Rainey, that they were entitled to fill in more land but chose not to, and now they have to go back to the beginning if they want to. As far as the lagoon is concerned, the Northwestern position was that they dug that lagoon out of their landfill, and what the IDNR found out was that was actually lake. And so they were prevented from filling it in because rather than excavating it, it was actually open water.
They made a lake.
It was the lake.
They made an atoll.
I may be wrong on all of that, but I think I'm remembering it correctly.
That was lake water.
And I think we may have a picture somewhere in the hallway here that actually shows the construction of the lagoon. That actually was helpful in determining that.
Well, and the other salient point is that Loyola looked into expanding, and they were denied by either Army Corps or IDNR or both, because they wanted to do
Similar.
Something similar.
Can I just add to that, only because I know this stuff pretty well, is that what Loyola was told was that in order to qualify to do the landfill that they wanted to do, they had to provide a significant public benefit. You've all heard of significant public benefits. And that required their landfill to be open for public use. Yeah, and they decided that wasn't what they really wanted. But they were sued by the Rogers Park Homeowners Association. I think that's where that finally settled, and it was settled. Went to federal court, and Marvin Aspen was the judge.
Interesting.
So, can I just ask my one question? I'm really concerned about where property lines are here. I would like us to work toward getting a firm hand on what's public land, what's private land. And I understand the water moves back and forth all the time, but it is a concern. I mean, I actually have people in my ward who have asked, can they walk on the other side of the rocks on the Northwestern landfill? Is that public land? And I go, I have no idea. But I think that is a question that is floating around out there, pardon the pun, and it would be helpful to know.
Agreed. We've looked at, plats of survey, and the plats of survey, the legal description may say at water's edge, but water's edge is dynamic. So, so that it's difficult. I think that on most of the properties, we do have some type of historic property lines, and again, we're seeing these I don't want to call it an encroachment, but we're seeing, this shift, and that's what we want to discuss tonight and get direction.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Is there any other discussion?
Yeah.
Yes. Right, I think it does make sense. But, the legal definition of riparian, is, it is sort of water's edge, isn't it? It's between high tide and low tide.
Sure. So good evening, Michelle Mason, Cup Deputy City Attorney. Surprisingly, there's very little case law on this in Illinois, just because of the fact that we have a very small sliver of Lake Michigan land. But we will look into this issue of the rocks and see if there's any case law on that. We'll have to draw from other jurisdictions to come up with some guidance for you, but we will bring that back to the committee.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Alderman Ravel? I'm sorry, I didn't see your light.
So we're waiting for IDNR to give us a kind of a definition of how we would determine what that historic property line would be?
Ingrid Eckersberg is our civil engineer in this, and she's had discussions with IDNR staff. Yes, that is one of the questions that, where does their definition fall into play here?
Right, okay.
So.
I don't know kind of what our timeline and process is, but I would assume that at some point, once we have something substantive to actually talk about, that we'd want to have a public meeting with all the 42 property owners who are on the lakefront, just to give them a heads up and get their feedback. And I think it might also be instructive to have some input from an expert like John Shabika to tell us, are we going to be getting into some unintended consequences if we say X and he knows that the lake's going to do something else that's going to interfere with what we think we're doing? So just like to see us build those kinds of things into the process.
Yes. Yeah. And the detail I showed you was a Shabika and Associates design, and we showed that. We weren't. They do. Yeah. Pretty much all of the projects that are coming in are his designs, or their designs, I should say.
Well, I think that we obviously should have a public process and provide notification to all 42 property owners, and then we should have a special notification for property owners, but also notification citywide for a discussion on this. And then I do think Alderman Fisk's point about what is, and Ravel's point about what is the definition, or if there is one in Illinois, or how much, or what is being used, so we all can understand what's the definition of riparian and the eastern border, would be very good. And then I do see an extra hand out here from someone who I think this would apply to. Yes. Yes, you may. Mm-hmm. Sign up. Okay, yes.
Hi, my name is William McGrath. I'm an owner of one of those 42 properties. I'm at 943 Edgemere Court. And I'd like to just comment to 2 or 3 points. Specifically, John Shabika is in the business of selling revetments. That's his business. And he is not an expert. He wants to sell, he is an expert, but he wants to sell revetments. And I've seen materials that he has submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers and to the Illinois DNR that is just outright false. He makes assumptions and asserts them as though these are reality. I live there. I know that the assertions that he's making are not reality. So I caution you about looking to experts who are trying to sell revetments as a source. The second comment I'd like to make is just to address to the relevance of the so-called property edge. I don't think that really should be the focus of the council. It should not be the focus. It's a factor, but I believe the city needs to adopt a policy that is consistent with what it's trying to protect, And it is not necessarily, in Illinois, we have a very strange, it's different from Michigan and Indiana. And the cases are old, there are only a few cases, but they basically say riparian means the water's edge, wherever it may happen to be, from day to day. It is clear also that people do have the right to walk and play and boat and whatever up to the water's edge, wherever it may be, from day to day. The Department, or the Army Corps of Engineers, has now adopted a policy that they have inserted in some of these recent revetments that say, okay, we know you're putting this revetment in public waters. Please be aware of the fact that we're not giving you ownership of that land. So is the implication that if someone puts a revetment on public waters, that other people can come and use that revetment? Well, you know, that will be the logical conclusion, and that creates issues of liability for the city and for homeowners, because it also affects the city's properties. So I would just urge the city to, and I believe this proposal is very good. I'm very much enthusiastic about this process. But I believe you need to develop a position of where you're going to permit these revetments to go, and not necessarily worry about whether it's at the water's edge or not the water's edge, or where the high water mark is, or where. Those are relevant to where you decide you're going to put your boundary. And today there's probably pretty good precedent because there's 42 houses there and you know where the properties are. But for the most recent ones where landfill has been pushed in on the theory of we're protecting what's here, so I'm going to give you another 20 feet out in order to protect what's here. No, sand protects that. Nature protects that. You don't need to fill in another 20 feet because then the next guy's going to want 20 feet more. I mean, it's an endless process. So thank you for your comments tonight and your time.
Thank you. Good points. All right. Staff, do you need something more from us?
No, I think we have direction, and we'll return with some revisions and additional information.
Okay. Mr. Lawrence,
I just have one question. In Gary's presentation here, it makes a statement about the IDNR not permitting a landfill on any private property. If you could slide back to that.
Keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
Right there. IDNR regulations state the conversion of public waters to private land is prohibited. So with that statement, if somebody goes ahead and fills in their beach with land without permit, then what recourse is there with respect to the city and the IDNR? If someone, believe it or not, someone has gone ahead, done a landfill here in Evanston without the permission of the IDNR or the Army.
Mr. Lawrence, you should come up to the mic. But I think that we'll get an answer to you on, I mean, that's what we're trying to figure out right now.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So, Ms. Leonard? Yes. Did you want to?
No, I think we can probably return sometime in January with this.
Okay. Yes, I think this is very well thought out, and I think that something that we should get onto before it overtakes us. Okay. All right. Thank you all. I think that concludes our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? All right. The City Council will start in 10 minutes at 8:40. Okay. Thank you all.
Oh my gosh, Junad wanted to speak.
Oh, excuse me, Junad, would you like to come up and speak now, or would you rather speak to a bigger audience?
I want to speak now.
Okay, all right. I apologize, yes. You're going to speak on miscellaneous?
Well, now that I heard this thing about the lake,
No, wait, you don't get to do that.
I'm going to say something about Northwestern and the landfill over there and what's going on. Not about a year or two ago, the city said residents would have access to that beach north of that new athletic facility. I'd like to know where that stands. I'd like staff to come back and tell us when residents are going to get to use that beach at Northwestern.
Okay.
What's going on with that? Now, the next comment I have is something different. And this is non-related to any issue tonight. I've talked to several council members about this, and that's the fact the city needs to come up with a plan for the downtown. What I want to call it is a computer-generated model, a 3D model of the downtown area, not this one-dimensional drawing that certain staff members are using. That's all they can use.
I'm going to interrupt you and say that Ms. Leonard and I already discussed that about 5 months ago, 6 months ago.
So
Yeah.
what are we doing about it then? If are we doing anything, and why? Well, let me go on with what I have to say.
One of the things we discussed was every new applicant for a PUD would be required to produce a three-dimensional model to a certain scale that the city would provide, and that she and I have discussed potentially having an entire model of the downtown produced, because 3D printing is so inexpensive at this point.
Well, and let me go a little further with that. I mean, what needs to be done is with the model should show the downtown as it is, the downtown with so-called zoning that we could have, and then when the applicant puts a big building there, to make it look like how many big buildings we're going to have in the downtown. And I think we need this done sooner than later, and it's not that expensive. And somehow the city, if the city doesn't want to fund it, make these applicants fund it somehow.
That's what we've done. We've asked the last applicant to produce a 3D model to the scale that we gave them, and they produced it for the Albion project. That was right here.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a computer-generated model that I can put up on that screen anywhere in the downtown, take any view of the downtown I want to see, and look at it. That's what I'm talking about, not these wooden models and things. That's technology so old it's silly to even use.
It's produced by a 3D printer.
Well,
That's not that. I think that's newer technology. It's not made of balsam wood, you know.
Yeah, well, still. I mean, but you can have it up on the screen.
Those are good ideas, too. I think we're trying to provide it in as many forms so that as many people who have different issues about how they see things, whether they need a 3D representation in front of them that they can touch or something on the screen. So we're trying to make it as understandable as possible to as many people as possible. Okay, thank you.
All right.